processes work. So first of all, you're all probably thinking, who is this guy? How does this all work? In New Jersey, we are somewhat unique among the states in that we have an appointed Attorney General. The Attorney General is John Hoffman. He's been Attorney General for about 2 years. He's incredibly dedicated public servant. We have an appointed Attorney General. Most other states have an elected Attorney General. I think our system's better. I think it builds in some independence. The Attorney General, I'm in charge of the criminal justice wing of the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General has a lot of different branches. I handle criminal justice along with my staff. There's consumer affairs. There is division of law. There's gaming, racetrack. There's only New Jersey stuff. Juvenile justice, civil rights. There's about 9 different divisions that are all under the Attorney General's office. One of the jobs I have about 500 people who work for me, prosecutors, detectives, investigators, staff, that kind of thing. We make our own cases the same as the prosecutor's office does. We tend to focus on large financial cases, political corruption cases, that kind of thing. We also, one of the most important things we do is we supervise all 21 county prosecutors, and we make policy for all law enforcement across the state, and we'll talk about that here today. And look, we have a tremendous group of county prosecutors. I know all 21 of them. I talk to all 21 of them regularly. Let me just say, I don't say this sort of casually, but the prosecutor you have here in Morris County is really one of our best. He is very dedicated on this issue and so many issues we deal with. He's leading up some of the most important issues we deal with in law enforcement. He's got a great staff with Tom Salanti and the other APs and detectives who came here today. So consider yourselves lucky here in Morris County. So about a year ago, we started to dig in earnest into issues involving police accountability, police community relations, and making sure that there was open communication between law enforcement and the communities that we serve. And so the Attorney General, we began working very closely with not just law enforcement leaders, but community leaders on drafting some new policies. And there's 2 big ones that came out that we issued in July of 2015. One of them governs use of body cameras by police. And I should mention, part of the reason Chief Wagner and I have to leave a little bit early today is because I'm going to meet with a couple hundred chiefs of police who will ask me angry questions about this policy and how does it work and what does it mean. I can take it. And so that's an important part of one of the things we did. The other thing we did was issue revised rules for how police-involved shootings and police-involved uses of deadly force get investigated. And part of that policy is we are going to go around, every county prosecutor has to have a session just like this one. And I've been to a handful now. This is on the early side. Everyone has between now and the end of the year to do it. But it's interesting to just get around the state and meet with different clergy, and you see very different areas, different rooms, different churches, different cities. I was in Essex County in Newark. I think it was Thursday or Friday of last week. Very different building, very different crowd, but warm and hospitable and interested, just like this one. And look, an important part of the whole way we've approached this is community involvement. When we drafted these policies, this was not a bunch of lawyers and cops in a room. We sat there and worked on the details of these policies with Rich Smith, who's the president of the NAACP, Jose Martinez, who is in charge of the Latino Leadership Alliance, Dr. Chowdhury, who's in charge of the Muslim organization, Jim Johnson, who's in charge of New Jersey Community Support, Ryan Haygood, who's in charge of the Institute for Social Justice, Steffi Bartley from Elizabeth, Reverend Steffi Bartley, who some of you may know, who's the New Jersey president of the National Action Network. This was really an interactive process. We had the final say, of course. We signed the dotted line, we issued the policy, but it was issued with input from every, we hope, every representative community. And now our work's not done either. We're doing these outreach sessions, we're doing them across the state, and we have study committees formed for both policies that are, in fact, the next one's meeting on Friday. We're continuing to study these policies, see if we're doing them right, study how things are working in the field. So that brings me to the third point. And by the way, I'll take questions at the end. Anything you want to ask about this policy or anything. So what I want to do today is walk you through the policies for how police-involved shootings get investigated. Because it's so important that people understand how this works. People talk about the word transparency a lot. One thing that I will assure you is we will make sure there is 100% transparency of process, procedural transparency. I want every person in this state to understand how this works. Now, let me put off to the side. People often want to know when there's a high-profile police-involved shooting, we get demands, angry demands from the media every day. We want to know what you found. Why won't you update us? Tell us the police officers' names. What did you find today? What did you find today? We will not release that information. We will release that information when appropriate. If someone's charged criminally, we will release information. And one of the new things you'll see is when an investigation closes without a charge, we will issue information. But we will not issue rolling information to appease whatever short-term gratification impulse is out there. And the reasons we don't do that are very simple. Number one, if you released information every day, if we released information, what we're finding every day, you would compromise your investigation. You can't put out public statements, today we found this, today we found that, today a witness was interviewed and told us this, because every other witness is going to read that. And you're going to compromise and contaminate your witnesses. The second thing is, and this tends to go out the window sometimes when police officers are the subject of investigations, but it shouldn't and it won't, is that people have rights, the rights of the accused. Or in this case, if you're investigating a police officer, if you're investigating any person, not even accused yet, just someone who's being investigated, we would never in a million years, if anyone in this room was being investigated, if any of your family members were being investigated for whatever, robbery, fraud, theft, drugs, anything, we would never announce to the public, yes, we are investigating criminally Mr. Smith. That would destroy reputations, careers, that would compromise the right to be presumed innocent. We would never do that to any person who's under investigation. We will not do that to a police officer. But again, what we will do is be completely transparent about our process and what goes into it. That's why I'm here today, and that's why we're going around the state doing this. So let's dig into it. Is there a clicker or something?
Just the page down, right here.
Okay.
Cycle you through this one.
All right. And one other thing, when we were out in the hallway, someone, it may have been one of the media members, asked, why are you here in Morris County? They haven't had a police shooting incident. And I said, well, first of all, we're going to every county, because whether any county has already had an incident or not, there can be incidents anywhere, and people are interested in this issue, whether there's been a shooting in a particular county or not. This is an issue of statewide and national importance. Okay, so let's get to the policies. So we have two different documents that set out how our police-involved shooting investigations work. The first one was a directive that the Attorney General issued in 2006, so about 9 years ago. These are all on the internet. You can find them very easily. You can just Google them. And that set the basic structure. Just a couple months ago, when I was talking about the new policy we issued, was a supplemental directive we issued on July 28th, and that added some new features and made a couple changes, but kept the basic structure in place. So, like I said, when we drafted the supplemental directive, the new rules, we didn't do that by ourselves. We did that in consultation with leaders from law enforcement and leaders from the community. I listed some of these entities earlier. Everyone from county prosecutors, state police, chiefs of police, to the NAACP, the National Action Network, Noble, Social Justice, Communities Forward, a good cross-section of the community. So there are 7 core principles that underlie our directive, and I've already sort of begun to touch on some of these. Number 1, comprehensive, rigorous, and impartial investigation. This means the most important thing as prosecutors and police officers is that we get it right. And that's why I said earlier, that's why we will not, apologies to the members of the media, I know you want daily updates on what we're finding. We won't do that, because if we do that, it's going to compromise the integrity of our investigation and the quality of our investigation. Number 2, maintaining and protecting the integrity of ongoing investigations and the rights of the accused. And I talked about that earlier. Same way we would protect the rights of the accused in any case, the rights of the accused in police cases are protected as well. Number 3, mandatory review of all actual and potential conflicts of interest. Lawyers know what that means. Conflict of interest is, I guess, what it sounds like. Making sure that nobody who's investigating a police-involved shooting knows the officer, went to school with the officer, went to the academy, babysits his kids. Any personal connections or any professional connections will be separated out. Number 4, multi-tiered layers of independent review. One important feature of our system here in New Jersey, because we have that unique system where the Attorney General's office directly supervises the county prosecutors, most states don't have that, right? You saw, for example, Ferguson, very high-profile incident. The district attorney in whatever county that is does not report to the Attorney General. So that's one layer of review. Here in the state, we have municipalities, county prosecutors, and Attorney General's office. And so we are able to have different layers of independent review built into our process. No case will ever be not dismiss is not the right word. No case will ever be disposed of without criminal charges unless at least 2 different offices have looked at that and reached the same conclusion. Number 5, uniformity in statewide investigative and legal practice, including grand jury practice. We have 21 counties in this state. We have 21 county prosecutors, and a lot of things are done 21 different ways. Some of that's inevitable, but one of the jobs that we have at the Attorney General's office is, to the extent possible, to make sure that people are doing it right and doing it the same in every county. Number 6, transparency of process. That's why I'm here today. We're talking about this. And factual findings at appropriate junctures. And we'll talk about that too. When is it appropriate, and when will we release public statements, and when will we release information? And finally, ongoing outreach and study. That's what we're doing here today. That's what we're doing across the state. So, to get into the processes, every time a police officer shoots his weapon in the course of duty here in New Jersey, it goes into one of 2 tracks. I don't want to get too bogged down into the abbreviations we use, but essentially Category 1, which we call OIS, Officer Involved Shooting, is any time a municipal police officer, a city, town police officer fires his weapon. Morristown, Parsippany, Whippany, PD, whatever it is, that goes into one category. The other category is what we call SRT, Shooting Response Team. And that applies anytime a county level officer, so if one of Prosecutor Knapp's detectives, or a state level officer discharges their weapon, that goes into the second category. And the most common occurrence there is going to be state police, because they have the most numbers. You see them up and down the highways. They're involved in a good percentage of these incidents. So everything's either going to be officer involved shooting, which is municipal, or shooting response team, which is county or state. So let's start with what we call OIS, municipal level shooting. So again, are we in Morristown?
Yes.
All right, if a member of the Morristown Police Department, heaven forbid, has to discharge his weapon, this is how that case is prosecuted. The first thing I want to make sure everyone understands, if a member of the Morristown Police Department discharges his weapon, that case is not investigated by the Morristown Police Department. I know that it is done that way in other states, in some of the cases you may have read about. And I will tell you that this is one of the new features of the new policy. When we started looking at this, we asked county prosecutors, what do you do where a Morristown police officer fires his weapon, for example? It was about 50-50. About half the counties said, well, then Morristown Police Department's going to be involved in investigating. And the other half said, oh, no, we will then specifically wall off. We will keep that police department out of the case. And we made the decision that that's the better practice. And so anytime a municipal officer discharges his weapon, the case is investigated always not by that PD, but by the county prosecutor. Some of the counties used to include that PD, some didn't. We've now said that county prosecutors, you have Prosecutor Knapp, every prosecutor has a specialized team that investigates this. They are to exclude the police department of the police officer who fired his weapon from the investigation. The only exceptions are first responders. Whoever gets to a scene first has to be the first responder. We're never going to compromise that. And if there are specialized ballistic services or specialized expertise that only this police department offers, then with the permission of the prosecutor, that police department can perform those expert functions. I'll tell you, I don't think there's any police department here in Morris County. There's very few in the state that have that kind of specialized expertise. Municipal police departments, really Newark PD is the only one. They have a ballistics lab. So that's a very, very narrow exception. So the county prosecutor runs the investigation, county prosecutor's office. That PD is walled off, and a conflict check. Within 72 hours, 3 days of any police-involved shooting, the prosecutor has to fill out a form, and we've circulated this form saying, here's the prosecutor, first assistant, the chief of detectives, and here's all the people who are going to be involved in the case, and here's the name of the police officer who's involved, and here's whether any of them know him. There's a lot of them are going to be never knew him, never dealt with him. Sometimes it'll be their buddies from high school. Sometimes it'll be had a case with him 3 years ago. And then we then get that form, and we can decide to do one of a couple things. If there's a conflict, we can say, okay, this person who knows the police officer, he's out of the case. We did it down south with a county prosecutor, the top person who knew the cop who was being investigated, and we said, fine, county prosecutor's out, first assistant's going to run it. If there's too much of a conflict, if too many people know this person or he's too intertwined, we can move the entire case out of one county and into another county, or we can take it ourselves in Trenton. So that's case by case. We have to look at the facts and what the conflict check shows. So I want to talk a little bit about grand jury. At the end of the county prosecutor's investigation, the county prosecutor makes a determination whether a case needs to be presented to a grand jury. We'll talk a little more about grand juries and what they are. This is important. There is a presumption, a standing presumption in all of these cases that any case involving police-involved shooting or use of force must go to a grand jury unless the undisputed facts indicate that the use of force was justifiable under law. Talk a little bit about what that means in a little bit, justifiable. But there is a strong presumption that cases go into a grand jury. Or the prosecutor can put a case in the grand jury if the interests of justice require it. So the prosecutor can put more cases in the grand jury, but not less. The cases that do not go into a grand jury, it's a very narrow band of cases. Now, if the county prosecutor decides that a case does not need to go into a grand jury, that is not the end of it. It does not end there. The case then gets written up by the county prosecutor and sent to my desk. And I have a team of about 10, 12 people who review those cases, and then we reach our own determination. And that is what lawyers call a de novo interpretation, ruling, meaning I don't get a case and say, okay, well, the prosecutor said it doesn't need to go into a grand jury. I'm going to sort of I'm going to lean that way. I get a case and I look at it, my people look at it from scratch, brand new. And if we reach the same conclusion that the case does not need to go into a grand jury, that the undisputed material facts show the use of force was justified, then that's, remember I said independent review. County prosecutors reach the conclusion, AG's offices reach the exact same conclusion. So we can agree with the county prosecutor, the case does not need to go into a grand jury. We can disagree with the county prosecutor. I just had a case a couple weeks ago where a county prosecutor said, I don't think this case needs to go into a grand jury. We looked at it and said, we think it does. And we sent it back and told them to put it in the grand jury. We can order that a police officer be reviewed administratively, internal affairs for discipline, or we can send a case back to the county prosecutor, and we do this as well, and say, hey, you need to do a little more investigation. You need to go interview this witness. You need to take a look at these labs, that kind of thing. So that's what I mean by independent layers of review. Okay. Let's pause there. I'll take it at the end, all right? Shooting response. Yeah, all right, you seem very insistent. Yes?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But the grand jury portion you just went over, there seems to always be an affirmative case. Is there ever an instance where there's no need for a grand jury because the act just automatically required some enforceable?
I'm not sure I follow you, I'm sorry.
Well, let me see if I can restate.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to talk a little more about the grand jury. Maybe I'll answer your question. Then at the end, we can come back to it. Okay? Because I am going to get to the grand jury. So let's jump to the second track of cases, where shooting response team, where a county or state level officer discharges a firearm. Those cases are investigated by what we call the SRT, the shooting response team. This is a specialized team that exists at the state level. It's comprised of deputy attorneys general. Those are state prosecutors who work in my office. The State Police Major Crimes Unit, which is a specialized unit. They're the best in the state in investigating these kind of cases. And DCJ detectives. Those are detectives who work for me in my office. Same thing with the county prosecutor's office. Within 72 hours, we have